Hello and welcome everybody to Feature Friday. Hi, I'm Jackie Kwan, co-founder of Uplifter. And with me today again is Garrett Trott, our super awesome, lovely product expert.
Hello, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
I was trying to fill in as many adjectives as I could, and I'm sorry that I only fit that many. I will fill in more next time.
That is three more than
Each
I
week.
deserve. I appreciate
Each week I will add an adjective.
Oh, you're just going to build on it like Bob it? That's awesome.
This week, I hope everybody's getting excited and happy about jumping into a long weekend here. This week, we're actually going to talk about policies. I know that we have a lot of clubs getting ready to get back to get back to sort of a fall schedule, and we've had a lot of questions about policies. So we thought we'd do a little bit of a refresher course on some of the new features that we've added with respect to policies, and really talk about how you might want to manage specifically like a COVID-19 assumption of risk policy, and then a concussion policy, because these are typically very common elements that a lot of clubs need to sort of manage. So given that, I'm going to let Garrett take it away and show us how to set up policies for some of these specific use cases that we've got.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Yes, we are going to be taking a look at policies, specifically two scenarios that a lot of clubs are tackling right now. We're going to be looking at COVID policies, both the acknowledgement and assumption of risk, but also a self-assessment option that is very popular. We'll also be looking at a Rowan's Law / concussion policy for both the parent and guardian as well as the participant. So to get started, we are going to pop over to the administrative side here, and we're going to navigate to Settings, Policies. And from this page, we can select the Add New Policy option to get started. Now we're going to tackle the COVID stuff first, because that is certainly the thing that is sweeping everyone's minds these days. So let's do a COVID acknowledgement of risk. Let's do an assumption of risk. Now, the wording of this is certainly at your discretion there. As well, as an FYI, the content of your policies is also at your discretion. It is going to be very important for you to work with your legal team and your governing bodies to make sure that the content that you have in your policies is capturing exactly what you need, as well as what you need from within your province. Or state, or what have you. So here we've got our policy name, and now I get to select how it applies. Now, the assumption of risk is generally something that the parent or guardian is going to accept on behalf of the participant, and that's usually the case if the participant is 18 or younger. So in this particular instance, I'm actually going to change this apply to participant. And what that's going to do is actually show this policy on a per participant basis. But we want to make one other change to this, and we'll see that in just a second. Before we do that, however, we get to choose when it's presented for something of the assumption of risk. Learning how to speak today. The at invoice option is totally fine. We also get to specify an acceptance duration here. Now, the assumption of risk probably should parallel your season or your governing body's season. So you can have this as an effective until, and then set something like August 31st for some organizations, or to July 31st, June 30th, for other organizations. Now from here, what you can do is select the policy acknowledgement. Now the policy acknowledgement is the one element that we need to make a change to. We need to set this to parent or guardian if participant is under the age of majority. So by selecting this, yes, we are presenting this policy on a per participant basis, but we're going to be presenting it to the parent or guardian, and we get to specify, or need to specify, the age that we want to mark as the age of majority. This can be any age that you want, but generally speaking, we're talking about 18 years old. Now, if you do want to halt this policy from being presented to the parent or guardian if the participant is over the age of 18, you can also set a max participant age for which you'd want to set 1 year younger than your mid-age of majority there. Next, we get to specify the acceptance requirements here. And so we do want this to be a required policy. So we are going to check that off. And in many cases, especially with everything being so nebulous these days, it is very handy to also mark off that you require a digital signature. This is going to force them to type their name into a field in order to actually accept this policy.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
I don't know what you did with the 17 years of age thing.
Oh, because this is the max age that you want to present it at?
Right.
So
oh, I see.
Over
So
17.
Right. So then you would just create
change.
a separate policy for the participants if they needed that. So
Exactly.
I want, yeah, okay. So, and that's, but you can actually leave that blank, could you not?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You could.
Okay.
Now, thank you for bringing that up. So
Yeah.
these sort of variations, these are just the most common, but they're not the be all and end all by any means. You can absolutely adapt these to your needs. So you could certainly have an assumption of risk that shows if to the parent or guardian if they're younger than 18, or to the participant if they're older than 18, and just leave this blank. Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
So you could have your, oh, go ahead.
No, finish. Go ahead. Go ahead. Don't let me interrupt you.
It's too late, lady.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
So you can absolutely have your policy detailed content, keeping that in mind that it could be either the parent or guardian or the participant themselves based off of these settings.
Can I talk about a couple of pitfalls, or were you going to cover that later on?
Let's talk about pitfalls. What's going on?
So a couple of pitfalls that we've noticed some clubs that sort of have been implementing this have fallen into is when you use this option, parent or legal guardian, if participant is under the age of 18, what this is going to do is if the participant that you're registering the into the program is under 18, it's going to have a little checkbox at the bottom of the policy that says, I acknowledge that I am the parent or guardian. And it's also going to say, I acknowledge that I am at least 18 years of age. So a couple of things have occurred, and that is we've had some clubs where the parent has accidentally created the account on behalf of basically their child. So instead of them being the account holder and adding their children, they've actually added their child as the account holder. So the child is now, 8 years old, and they have an account on Uplifter, and they've added themselves as a participant, and this child who is 8 years old is trying to agree to this policy, and they can't because they're not 18. So what Uplifter does when a policy is presented, when you actually use these fields for age of majority, if it applies to a participant, Uplifter will automatically check to see how old the participant is based on the data that it has. Additionally, if we use this field of parent or legal guardian, if participant is under the age of majority, if Uplifter has the age of the parent, it's going to automatically use that as a check. So if it sees that the parent is only 8 years old, it knows that that person who is going through the checkout can't possibly be at least 18 years old if they're the parent or legal guardian. So there's a couple of things that you can do. Number one, you can contact the parent and say the reason why you can't actually accept this policy is we know that you're not 18. So Uplifter knows you're not 18, so you're not allowed to move forward. And the alternative would be to also include the allow policy acceptance to be sent to another party by email. This is we've used this as a stopgap. It does sort of add another kink to the registration process, or at least another step. What will happen is another box will appear at the bottom of the policy that says, would you like to email this policy to the person who is the parent or legal guardian to accept it on their behalf? So the person needs to basically wait in their checkout. They can enter in the email address. It will send an email to the person who's actually supposed to accept the policy. They can then click on the link on their email, accept the policy, and then they'll be able to proceed with the checkout. But they kind of have to sit and wait in the checkout until somebody accepts that policy on their behalf. So it is a great way to transfer that policy to the person who's actually the correct person to accept the policy. However, it does take an extra step. So just keep in mind that the parents do need to have their proper information in the system in order to know that in order for Uplifter to know that they're 18, so that they can proceed with accepting those policies. I'm sorry, Garrett. That was very verbose. It's your turn. Your move.
What? No. Oh, sorry. I thought let's pretending I was asleep. No, hello. Yes, thank you. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie. I appreciate that. And so, yes, that is our COVID assumption of risk option there. Now, you'll probably also want to introduce a COVID self-assessment option. So we're going to cancel this guy right here. We're going to add a new policy and start from scratch. This will be our COVID self-assessment. Now, you do, again, want to be sure that you, with your legal team and your governing body, that something of this nature is viable for your club. But assuming that it is, you can create a COVID self-assessment that your participants need to process before they show up each day. So we would set this to apply to participant, and rather than presenting it at the invoice, we'd actually present it at creation and login. And what this will do is make sure that when a user logs in, this policy is presented to them and they must proceed with reviewing and accepting it. Now, the act of accepting this policy is essentially the act of them performing a self-assessment, verifying that they pass all of the elements, and then accepting the policy to signify that. So what you would have is this creation and login option. You'd have an expiry for the acceptance duration, and you can have a duration of something like 0 days. This means that when I accept or complete this policy as of today, it expires at midnight tonight. So when I come for tomorrow, or I come on, next Wednesday, before I come, I log in and I accept it again for that day to signify that I have performed the self-assessment and passed. So this expiry option here set to 0 days. You can also, of course, set this to other values. I believe in our article, we have it as a 7-day option. That is totally up to you guys, whatever you prefer in terms of how often your users are accepting these things.
We also noticed that a lot of clubs are also using this for instructors. So not just your participants, but creating a way for your instructors to log in and be able to, every day that they come in for work, before they come in, they just need to log in and they need to make sure that they're a participant, or you can do it for a member policy, and they can then do the same self-assessment, and then you have records of that. That this gives you the ability to actually go through and print a report that says I've got assurances and self-assessment acknowledgements from all of my coaches, every day this week, or at least once per week or whatnot. So lots of different ways that you can use this policy element, not just for the participants at your club, but as well for your staff and your instructors.
Absolutely. Now, beyond that, you'll also want to prompt to acknowledge identity. Now, in this particular instance, you actually want the participant to be performing these self-assessments. Otherwise, they're not really self-assessments. So you would specify that this is going to be a prompt to acknowledge their identity, that they are in fact the participant. And once again, you can mark off that they require a digital signature. And in this way, you have that extra element of insurance that it's actually the participant that's performed this self-assessment. Now, again, if you wanted to, you can introduce an option where it's the parent or guardian if they're under 18. That's certainly acceptable in most cases. But if you do want to have the participant being very, very specific about being the one performing the self-assessment, then absolutely do that. Just like the other ones, you want to make sure, or the previous policy, you want to make sure that this is marked to be required to be accepted in order to proceed.
So we've talked about how it is that we set up these policies, but one thing that you might not be aware of is what happens when you actually create these policies. So in this case, when you create a creation or login policy, what will happen is as soon as the member logs in, if there are any required policies that have not yet been accepted or have expired already and are required to be renewed on a regular basis, the members, once they log in, they'll actually be redirected immediately to their policies page, and you don't actually have any required policies.
I don't have any policies.
So there's actually an account policies page, and they'll automatically be redirected there as soon as they log in, and it'll show them in red or pink, as it were, all the different policies that this member account has outstanding for all the different participants in their account, and they'll be asked to review those policies and accept them. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so those are the two COVID options. So now we'll move along to another very popular, or another required policy. It's not popular. This is Rowan's Law or a concussion policy. So it is important to obviously keep your members and your participants apprised of all of the latest information about concussions. And so in this instance, what you can do is you can add a new policy and you can make sure that they are aware of those elements. First and foremost, you can do the parent and guardian version. So you can have your parent or guardian policy name here, and then of course this is going to apply on a member basis. Now with the concussion policies, generally speaking, they need to accept it once per season, or often once per year as it were, so once per season of your governing body. So in that particular instance, you can have this apply and present it at an invoice. Your policy acceptance duration is going to be effective until, and what this will do is allow you to select when that expires. So for things like Skate Canada, what have you, you can set this to August 31st, for instance. Once you have that set up, you can then go to the policy acknowledgement, and you do want them to acknowledge that they are the parent or guardian. And of course, you very likely will want to access a digital signature for them as well for this. This is another policy that needs to be accepted in order to proceed, and your policy details can be entered in below.
Some organizations may require that your concussion policy for the parent be accepted once per participant. So that is another option as well. Sometimes so check with the rules of the acceptance of your concussion policy. Do you need this to be accepted once per participant or just once per parent? So and you can change that setting on the apply to segment at the top.
Yep, that's exactly right. So if you need the parent or guardian to accept on a per participant basis, you would change the apply to participant, and you would change this to parent or guardian. Now, there is also a concussion policy or Rowan's Law policy that you can introduce on a per participant basis, and this is actually something that the participant needs to accept. So this is a very important one. You want to set up your policy, though, so that it applies to participant, and you want the prompt to acknowledge to always be the participant. From my understanding, it is the age of 10 or 13, something like that, Jackie. Do you remember? It's around there. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Memory's failing me.
Well, and as well, it also depends, like that might be for Rowan's Law in Ontario, but every province and every governing body does have their own details in terms of the acknowledgement of what age or what group of athlete needs to actually accept the participant portion of the concussion policy.
Very true. Thank you for that. So now that you have this set to apply to participant, you can then also set when it presents. Again, very similar to the parent and guardian version of this, it's very often the case that you only need them to accept once per season, in which case you can do add invoice, and you can change this to effective until and choose the end of your governing body's season. From there, it's always great to have that digital signature just to make sure the person who accepted is in fact the person who should be accepting. And of course, you can add your policy content and click Create New.
The one thing that I know in Ontario, for example, typically with the participants version of the concussion policy, I believe you can actually add the max participant age to present the policy. I think you only need to present the policy up until a certain age. Is it 25? I think it is. Is it? Now I'm asking you, Garrett.
Yeah, I think it's 26. So 25 would be the last year that you'd have to present. You're correct.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. So that is how to build your COVID stuff and your Rowan's Law / concussion stuff.
You're not done. Or are you done? Are you done?
I'm totally not done. But what's up? What do you think I'm not done about,
though? We did add one other feature that I know a lot of organizations are suggesting that their member clubs actually use as part of the policy management, and that is in our settings. So it is in, do you remember, Garrett? Yes.
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, okay, you're talking about the scroll down?
Yeah, the scroll down. So one thing that I know some organizations are suggesting that their member clubs also include to ensure that when somebody accepts a digital policy, they're not just clicking checkboxes and clicking through, but they're actually reading the policy. What you'll also want to take a look at is see whether or not your governing body or your legal team suggests that you also check off this one option. It's under Uplifter settings, under policy acceptance settings. Under settings, Uplifter settings, and the site options tab. And you scroll down to the policy acceptance settings, and you want to enable that the members are actually required to scroll down to the very bottom of the policy before they're allowed to accept. So this basically forces them to ensure that they've actually, in some way, shape, or form, read to the bottom of the policy instead of only seeing the very top of the policy and clicking accept. This actually requires them to actually make sure that they actually do scroll through the entire policy. That gives you better assurance that they are accepting something that they have reviewed. So we've actually made this as a separate site setting because we know that it might be a little bit, you might need to communicate some of that instruction to your members before enabling it. But we do encourage you to enable this to ensure that you cover off all the legal requirements for accepting digital policies on your Uplifter site.
And that is now completed. Now we've covered everything.
Did we really cover everything? I actually think there's one more thing, but I can't remember what it was. I was going to say something, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, it's too late. We hit the 20-minute mark, so.
Oh, yeah. We're done? Is that it?
You guys get no more information. Yeah. Excellent. So if you guys have any questions or concerns, you're always, of course, more than welcome to reach out to support@uplifterinc.com. We're always here and happy to help you out. So if you do want to make some variations or some changes to those policies, give us a shout and let us know. And of course,
yes, as always, if you happen to know a club that's struggling with managing some of these elements with their club registration and managing social distancing with all these different digital, with all these waivers and not wanting to deal with paper, please do refer and save. So if you're a club working with Uplifter already, if you refer another club to use our Uplifter services, you'll receive a little bit of a discount for 6 months, and they'll also receive a little bit of a discount for 6 months if they sign up with Uplifter and get up and running shortly. So if you have any questions, as always, support@uplifterinc.com. We're here to give you a hand. Hoping everybody does have a safe Labor Day long weekend, and hoping for a great and super start to the fall season. I know it's a little bit different, but we're all in this together, and we're all going to get through it. So.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, you're supposed to say something.
Yes, we will. Encouraging. Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. It was always a pleasure, and we'll see you next Friday.
Thanks so much. Take care.